Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Who's Up show. I know what you're thinking. Shouldn't it be a prettier person than me? But I'm going to do the introduction, and Amber's going to take over after that. Now, we have a very special guest here today. We have Mr. Ed Opperman, who is the president of Opperman Investigations, a private detective agency based in Colorado. He has lots of years of experience investigating, everything from missing cats to missing people and everything in between, dealing with the White House and the press corps. So without further ado, Ed, how are you doing today?
Hey guys, how are you? It's great to be here.
How are you?
Good.
And so, Amber, would you like, before we get into it, Ed, is there anything you'd like to tell the audience before we get into a friendly discussion?
Off the top of my head, no, I can't think of anything now.
Okay, wonderful. We get right to the nuts and bolts of it. So I'll start one off, Amber, and then you can lead in after that.
Alrighty, sounds good.
So, Ed, you've got so many years of experience, and you do the type of work that not a lot of people get to do. What would you say is the toughest part or the easiest part about getting into the business of private investigating?
Oh boy. Well, first of all, there's a lot of different private investigation covers a lot of area. There's some states that if you're installing burglar alarms or you're doing a polygraph test, you need a PI license. So it covers a lot of ground. And then there's people who just do insurance, workman's compensation, surveillance stuff, all kind of ridiculous stuff. I never got into anything like that. My personal life has been a very interesting life. I've had a lot of experiences, a lot of different businesses, a lot of contacts, a lot of resources my whole life. And so with PI work, it's just something I fell into. People come to me with their problems and I solve their problems. It's basically what I do.
So you are a highly paid barber or barkeeper?
Yeah. You know what? I would love to be a barber. I would just love to wash people's hair.
And then one follow-up, Amber, then I'll let you go. So how many, you don't get the phone calls of wives thinking their husband's cheating, those sorts of things?
No, sure I do. And for a period of time, infidelity investigations was a huge part of my business. I took cell phone forensics. When cell phone forensics had first started around 2003, and people were out there doing cell phone forensics, I said, whoa, look at this. I can use this for infidelity investigations to catch people cheating by recovering deleted text messages from cell phones. Pretty much, and I took off doing that. We were doing more cell phones than all the big guys were doing back in those days. Then I got into email tracing. Okay, locating and identifying people from an anonymous email address. And I was doing so much work with emails, stuff that no one was doing back in those days, especially, that I came up with a little scheme, you might call it, right, to locate and identify people on dating websites by tracing their email address back to online dating websites. Once again, to catch people in infidelity investigations. So I've done a lot of infidelity stuff, but for a period of time there, I was doing a lot of infidelity.
Now, do you find people, if they're using VPNs and Tor browsers and things like that, does that protect them?
It protects them from other people like them, that are the hacker types that are doing the technical investigations. But those kind of people are so confident, they'll fall for little traps. You can set little traps for them and capture information about them, which is one good thing. And they're so arrogant. But people, as far as email tracing investigations, online investigations, if it's a stalking or online harassment stalking, those kind of people, they want you to know who's doing it. They want you to know it's me, but just not have enough information to catch me, that I'm going to legally get away with it. And again, those people are so obsessive. They're so sick in the head that they're easy to capture too. When I was doing a lot of that work, this was when I was doing it full time, and I was, on the hunt for these kind of people, that I got very good at it.
All righty. And so before Amber is going to come back, she got kicked off, unfortunately. But it gives me the question of this. Are there any jobs or proposed situations for you that you turned down? What sort of things
Yeah.
you turned down?
Turn out stuff all the time, you know. A lot of my work right now is I'm working with law firms to put together lawsuits, you know, and so I'm vetting out the potential plaintiff. And a lot of people that come to you, they think they have a case and they don't have a case. Or a lot of people, even more, don't think they have a case and they do have a case. I focus a lot on these days on sexual battery cases, childhood sexual battery cases against like a school or a church or anybody with a lot of money at the other end, like a celebrity. And most people think, well, I don't have any proof, I don't have any evidence. And then as you start to talk to them, you find out that they have so much proof and they have so much evidence. They've told their teacher, they told a therapist, even, they have diagnosis of PTSD. They got tons of evidence. But then they'll say, well, I don't remember the doctor's name, I don't remember my classmate's name, I don't remember the teacher's name. And you could track down all that stuff too and find a way. So those are cases that people don't think they have a case where they actually do.
Right next to the won't have.
Gotcha. Okay, Sam, did you know you're on?
Yes, I know.
Hey, Sam.
Hello. I'm just here to let Amber back in, so don't mind me.
Okay, I'll give her one more. Amber.
I'm
She
sorry.
got
I
kicked. I'm the
apologize.
tech guy tonight, so I'm just letting her
Okay,
back
and
on the stage.
I'll lead you into Amber because I know this will lead her into. Now, we've talked about the practicality of the day-to-day investigations, but we know you've done things that have gotten you in the news. And so what do you have to be wary of when you investigate somebody that has a public profile?
Okay, right off the bat, so you have access to these databases, right? These professional databases that the average civilian doesn't have access to, right? So when you start searching famous names and celebrities or famous politicians and stuff, right away you can get audited. It'll kick up a flag in your account. You'll get audited. You have to have a justifiable purpose of why you're doing these searches. I have access to social security numbers, all kind of stuff. So you have to have a justifiable purpose. So, but then they all know me now, so I don't have any problems now. But that's something you have to worry about when you're a newbie. And what was the other worry about? What was it again? The question?
Well, it's just with somebody of a public profile, do you have to not only your own security, but people from the outside kind of looking in and getting into your business?
Forget that. But another thing I have a problem with too is with these high-profile cases. Like I've been around a lot of high-profile stuff, and there's people out there that are these fascinated voyeurs, I guess you call them, who insert themselves into the litigation and just muck things up and just they're acting crazy. And these real interesting characters who just, especially these Hollywood cases, they leech onto these celebrities and they're so fascinated and they insert themselves into the cases and try and make a big mess out of things.
They just want what is it, the old adage? At least if you're in bad news is good news and is exposure. Like exposure gets you anywhere, anything. You hate them, you love them. At least your name's in the news.
Well, what was that old expression? Everybody wants to get into the act. What was that? Leo DeRocha? So that.
Yeah, Leo the Lip. All right, so Amber, I know you have some prepared questions. Go for it, sweetie.
I do.
No math, all right? There's gonna be no math on this test.
Oh yeah, okay,
No
yeah.
math.
So what's the square root of 47?
Yeah,
Right. So I know we talked when we had our pre-interview about some touchy subjects. My first question is about John Bobbitt. What can you disclose about John Bobbitt in the case? How
I
did
have
you
hard-
play a role?
No, I had no role in John Bobbitt
You have no
whatsoever.
role in John Bobbitt?
The only thing I can say about
Okay.
John Bobbitt is that he was living with Dennis Hoff. Dennis Hoff seemed to take him under his wing and was paying for John Bobbitt's housing and living. Where's John Bobbitt today? Is he still around?
Yeah, he's still around. He had surgery on his,
Again,
and
yeah.
now he's a porno star. Yeah, he's a porn star now.
What made you think I had a connection to John Bobbitt?
Because we had talked about it the last time, but I didn't know exactly what
No,
What
actually, we're
part
talking
you
about
had
Scott
to?
Thorson. Scott Thorson, the fellow with the Four on the Floor murders and Liberace. We were talking about him, but he also was living with Dennis Hoff, the art of
Okay.
the pimp of the Bunny Ranch guy down there in Nevada, who passed away too as well. So
Okay.
yeah,
All right. And then my next one, I'm gonna leave the biggest one for last,
okay.
because told you I was into it and I read all the files, so we're gonna leave that one for the last.
Okay.
Um, what can you tell me about Charlie Sheen?
Charlie Sheen. Well, my involvement with Charlie Sheen, you might remember when he had that year of winning, right? When all that stuff was going crazy, right?
Yep.
What happened was that started off, what kicked off that whole year of chaos with Charlie Sheen was he was at the Plaza Hotel with a young porn star who was visiting with him that night, Capri Anderson, who was a tiny little girl. She was tiny, tiny, and they got into some kind of dispute. He freaked out. He thought she stole a watch or something. He was going crazy and he had no teeth, and he had these like stubs in his teeth. He wasn't wearing his teeth. And so ultimately what happened was, though, is that she called for the police. She called for help. She was locked in a bathroom. And when the police came, he was naked and covered in blood from head to toe, his own blood, because he had broken these lamps and mirrors and stuff like that because he was just throwing a fit in there. So she became my client. And ultimately, we sued Charlie Sheen in that instance. But the attorney and the agent, Gina Rodriguez and Keith Davidson, who were involved in that lawsuit, later on went to sue Charlie Sheen again in the lawsuit about where he had those gay escorts over and he exposed them to HIV. And that was a big lawsuit. That was like $10 million. I didn't even get a piece of that, but there was, unfortunately.
You didn't get a 2% finder's fee?
No, I
Right.
did not.
2%.
No.
Okay.
I'm working on it.
My other question was about the same person, about if you knew if he had AIDS or not, if the stories were true, and you just
Well,
confirmed.
yeah, it came out that he had AIDS. Yeah, he had AIDS, and he exposed this gay male escort to AIDS, and that was what the subject of that lawsuit that he claimed was extortion. He said that was
Right.
extortion, and then he said that the case his child support with Denise Richards was extortion because she was going to tell people about his bisexuality. So he accuses all these people of extortion, blackmailing him with extortion just because he has a secret that he doesn't want everybody to know about. And then it came out too that Corey Feldman accused him, and ultimately came out finally and accused him of being the one who molested Corey Haim, which I've believed a long, long time. He barely denied that too. He barely even denied it. And then also too, Denise Richards came out with an allegation that he had child porn on his computer when she was divorcing him. Was it Denise? Yeah, it was Denise Richards. Yeah,
I believe it was her, the baby mother, Denise, that said that he had child pornography on his laptop or his phone, and that he was very abusive and just did a lot of drugs and drank a lot.
And then Denise Richards also too drank on Charlie Sheen, but then what do you call it? Denise Richards also she had for a period of time because Charlie Sheen wasn't allowed to visit his own children privately. He had to have supervision around. He only had supervised visitation. So when Brooke Mueller had her problems, then Denise Richards wound up with custody of their kids, and she wrote a letter to the court saying, "Listen, I can't keep these kids. They have signs of abuse. They're acting out against my children, both violently and sexually against my children. I can't take them." So, everyone laughs about Charlie Sheen like it's some funny guy, but I don't see anything funny with this guy at all, man.
Yeah, I only liked him during the 2.5 Men. A couple of the episodes kind of threw me off, but other than that, I was like, I'm not really feeling this guy. He just seemed like a narcissist.
Yeah. I never got a chance to watch any of that stuff, but just from my limited contact with the litigation around Sheen.
Right. So
All right,
altogether, you'd say he'd be a bad person.
I'll ask you this, Ed. At the end of a case, or the many cases you've had over the years, how many of them did you go, I really did help somebody? Like it made you feel good, the result of your investigation?
You know what? I got to tell you something. Almost every time. Almost every time. Yeah. Or at least I know that I tried. I was on the right team, and I tried as hard as I could. And then even when you'll have a good, successful result in court, sometimes still your relationship with the lawyers and the plaintiffs or the clients is still it's like you've been through a long marriage or a long boxing match or something like that. You just there's so many emotions that go on throughout the whole thing. You wind up bitter with each other, and people are were hoping for more, or didn't think you did good enough, or it was such a pain in the ass. It's brutal. It's just a brutal long litigation. It's just brutal on everybody involved. I don't think people realize that, how exhausting all that can be.
Yeah.
Right.
Not,
I mean,
not
it
to
seems
mention
exhausting.
expensive.
I'd be exhausted other than the money perspective, but to have to sit there and do the investigation and then have to put a case together, I'd be exhausted too. So I do get where you're coming from on that.
It's the personalities too. It's just
Yeah,
dealing
and
with
that
everybody's
I
demanding
drive myself
personalities.
crazy with just having teenage daughters.
Do it right.
So I imagine what you're going through on a daily basis.
And I tell you, with the money, usually nobody's really satisfied with the money. That's everyone always thinks, well, it could have been more. My cut wasn't enough. That's another bitter pill for me too.
Right. You want anything else to ask Bill about Charlie Sheen?
No, I don't necessarily dwell on Charlie Sheen because I've heard so many varying reports on him that you're not quite sure what to believe. Is he, a happy guy who's giving money to charity, or is he a womanizer that's putting his hands on them? And so that's why we kind of ask. Yeah. So here's one question, Ed. Have you ever had a case that you turned down that in hindsight you wish, oh crap, I should have taken that one? See, I make you think.
Yeah. That I turned down that I wish that I had taken? No, I think all the ones I've turned down for a good reason. And there's been a lot of cases that I spent a long time debating whether I should take them. And especially years ago when I was really kind of new with all this high profile stuff, one that really Charlie Sheen was one that I took a long time deciding how to deal with the other elements of that case. That I had a lot of soul searching went on. That I would talk to my dad, and I would talk to this pastor I knew up in this evangelist, actually, how I knew up in Maine that I used to work with the tent ministry. I would go to him for advice. But the Sarah Palin litigation, that was one that I spent a long time deciding whether to get into or not. What happened with that? Well, this is a long story. If you're ready for this, it's a big story.
I was going to ask you about her.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about her, so we can go for that.
Why don't you ask and see how it fits into the whole story?
I was going to ask you how you got into that case.
Okay, that's what I was about to get into then. Perfect. What happened was my client, Gina Rodriguez, who was the agent for she was involved with the Charlie Sheen thing. She was the agent for Stormy Daniels. She was the agent for Octomom. She's out there doing something. Okay. So she contacted me. She says, Ed, we have this young lady. She has allegations against Todd and Sarah Palin. We need to know if we can recover deleted emails from her computer. So I get her on the phone, and I told her the steps to take to recover these. I'm a digital forensic investigator, too. So I gave her some steps to take to try and recover these emails. We couldn't recover the emails. So Gina said, well, okay, fine. I said, I don't want it now. I'm moving on to the next one. So I was talking to Shirley Tripp, and she had given her story to the National Enquirer, and they were promising her $50,000. And she had gone to she had taken 4 FBI polygraph tests about her allegations about Todd Palin and Sarah Palin. But then what happened was they said, well, we're not going to pay you. We're not going to pay you the $50,000. And the reason is because the police chief of Anchorage, Alaska, did a press conference where he said, well, we've looked into all of these allegations about this young lady, Shirley Tripp, and we found no proof. We've looked at her address book and her computer, and we can find no evidence that she ever had any affairs with Todd Palin. So the National Enquirer pointed to that and says, well, we're not paying you. So Shirley, she comes to me, she goes, I'm not getting paid. What do we do? Okay, so, and no one was helping her. There was no army of lawyers all surrounding this young lady, this young massage therapist who was a single mom up there in Anchorage, Alaska, who had just gotten arrested for being accused of prostitution. Like this back a Craigslist prostitution ad, and she gets raided by like a SWAT team with machine guns and flashbang grenades, and then they pull her aside and they say, listen, we know you're involved with rich, powerful people. We demand you tell us everything you know. But she was smart enough. She said, well, I'm not saying nothing. So she had no one helping her. She had no one. So it took me a long time to decide whether I was going to get involved in that. And I'm such a sucker. I did. And especially back then, because that was no big payday at the end of that one. Right. But looking back, I wonder why. Why did I get involved there?
I would have wondered too.
I just thought it was the right thing. So when her case finally ended, and all of her, the police department in Anchorage, Alaska, wouldn't release her laptop and her address book and her diary and her calendar and all her material. So we had to go back and fight them over and over to get this material released. And on the day it was released, and it was sent from their evidence locker to my post office box in Henderson, Nevada, that same day, Sarah Palin went on the news. She went on Sean Hannity and said, you know what? I'm not going to run for president. And the reason why I'm not going to run for president is there's all these people out there picking on me. And they're claiming that my husband had an affair on me. And they're saying all these mean things about me. So I'm not going to run for president. Now, when we started working on all this stuff, okay, my house was broken into. I had people who were foreign intelligence, okay, who were inserting themselves into my life and trying to enter into relationships with me and influence my activities and stuff. They broke into a safe in my house and stole some digital forensic. Oh yeah, they drugged my dog. Okay. Oh yeah, this was no joke. All this period of time was no joke. And ultimately, like I said, Sarah Palin declined to run. And then what happens is months later, I get a phone call from Shirley Tripp, and she says, "Hey Ed, turn on the news." She goes, "You see this guy, this Secret Service agent?" She goes, "I know that guy." And what happened was there was a scandal down in Colombia with Obama. Obama went down to Colombia, and his Secret Service agents went to this brothel, and then they didn't pay the girls in the brothel, so they were arrested. It was a big giant scandal. And Shirley says to me, she goes, "Ed, I know that guy. He did the same thing to me." That same secret agent, a Secret Service agent, came to me for my services, and then he wouldn't pay me. So this blew up. This blew up into a whole big congressional investigation into Secret Service misbehavior. And I was hired by Joel Liebenberg, I guess. Joel Liebenberg, yeah. He was on the short list. I think he ran with the for vice president, along with that fellow Al Gore. Okay. Anyway, so it was a big congressional investigation. I was involved in that, and ultimately, it was proven that this guy was involved with Colombia. He was also working in Alaska too at the same time as Shirley Tripp too as well. See, one of the things with Shirley Tripp was when she was doing this prostitution activity, these massage therapy situations, she claimed that what was happening is they would send clients over to her, and then she would document the activities with these clients, and she would report back to Todd and Sarah Palin, and then they would, for whatever purposes, they would use that information to advance their careers.
Wow. Did you ever recover any of your stuff that was stolen from you?
Nothing was actually stolen. Okay, the big thing with that,
tampered.
Yes, they swapped out. There was a cable. I remember it was a Kyocera cell phone. Shirley Tripp had a Kyocera cell phone, and there was a data cable that was swapped out for a charging cable to sabotage the investigation. Yeah, that was
Was the dog okay afterwards?
yeah, the dog was okay later on, but we
Okay.
came home and the dog was acting all weird and sleepy. We said, "What's going on here?" You know, I drifted through that whole thing, man. I was so over my head at that time. It was on 2008.
I would have went to war over my dog.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. Well, it was a good dog, man.
So
Right.
here's a general question that could apply to a lot of things.
Yes.
What is your relationship and or what's it like to work with the Federal Bureau of Investigation?
Well, I've never worked with the Federal Bureau of Investigation as far as like side by side. I'll tell you this. It was the same thing. Gina Rodriguez, right? She calls me up and she says, "Hey Ed, Mikhail Salahi has been abducted." Okay, and Mikhail Salahi was the White House party crashers. Her husband Tariq and Mikhail Salahi were the White House party crashers. Remember that whole scandal? You know that became a congressional hearing too, as well,
Yeah.
where they took the fifth in that situation. But she had hooked up with Neil Schon from Journey. Okay.
Oh,
And
Neil
we knew that
Schon. Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And so she left her husband and ran off with Neil Schon, but everyone thought she was abducted. And so they hired me to try and find her. And I had a way to ping cell phones, to hit her cell phone and get a location on her cell phone at the time. And so while I was in the process of doing that, I got a phone call from the FBI who had been brought in on that case. And they says, "Hey, man, you got to get your nose out of this case because we're taking over this case. We're investigating this case." So I'm arguing with them. I said, "Well, this is a so, you know,
I had it first.
yeah, right. I was trying to
Don't
argue
take
with
my
them,
job.
but ultimately, after a bunch of threats, I did back away from that. But then when they did locate them and found out she was happily, you know, shacking up with Neil Schon, in my press release, I put out that after a consultation with the FBI, they were able to locate them.
Oh man.
And trying to take credit for it. But otherwise, FBI's there is a conflicting investigation. Sometimes that'll come up where you'll be working on something, and the FBI will be working on the same thing, and then they'll tell you to back off. I've had that happen a few times. And then otherwise, with the FBI, I've interviewed many former FBI agents for the radio show. I've done that.
Okay.
All right. Go ahead,
the
Amber. Do you
next-
have something to come up?
Yeah, I told you I got a couple. I got a couple. I'm saving the best for last. I tell you, I really am. I remember I was talking about Michael Jackson. Are you able to tell me anything on that? I know that there was speculations that he was on Epstein files. I don't
Yeah.
know what you can
Well,
touch
let's
on
start with
there.
this. Let's start with my whole Michael Jackson experience. Okay.
Yeah, let's talk about Michael
started
Jackson
out-
first.
Yeah, around in the 90s, okay? Around 1990, I was away from PI business. I was in the cell phone, the beeper and cellular phone business, okay?
Mm.
And the fellow that installed my cellular phones, his father worked on the Michael Jackson tour, the one that was promoted by Al Sharpton and Michael Francis.
Mhm.
Now, growing up in New York, I was an activist in New York. I knew Al Sharpton. I grew up with Al
Right.
Sharpton. And Al Sharpton was an FBI asset, by the way. He was working for the FBI and wiretap. Everybody had this brief. Oh, yeah, look that up, man. Al Sharpton was an FBI asset. He had a
I had
I'm
no
gonna write
idea.
that down. I'm gonna write
Oh,
it down
Christ.
so I know what to go look at.
He put together cases for the FBI against organized crime, and he had a briefcase with a recorder in it that he would record people. I'm on those recordings, and then he had a phone in his apartment that was alive when he picked up. The FBI was listening live. He's deep with FBI, and people think too CIA too as well, which we can get to on another show. I've done whole entire shows about that. We did a show called "Is Al Sharpton CIA as well as FBI?" FBI is everybody knows about this. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
So when we're hanging around, me and my car phone installation guy, and we're talking about his dad working on this tour with Al Sharpton, I says, "Oh, you know, Al Sharpton's such a nice guy." Why didn't I say nice guy? He says, "He's such an interesting guy. He's, you know, you'd love him. He's very charismatic. He knows the Bible. He's a very natural guy. You hang out with Al Sharpton. He's a cool guy." And I said, "No, He's no good. And this is because we worked on this Michael Jackson tour, and Michael Jackson got caught with little boys, and they covered it up. Okay. Now this was 3 years before the Geordie Chandler story. Nobody was accusing Michael Jackson of anybody. So this is in the back of my head. And I says, well, what about, can we sell the story to the Inquirer? Let's sell the story. I said, no way. These guys, they're dangerous. They're too dangerous. There's Michael Francis, the Colombo crime family guy, who's on all the podcasts now. He was the co-producer of that tour. So that's my first exposure to Michael Jackson. Later on, I was hired. I did some radio interviews about it. I interviewed Diane Diamond and stuff like that. And then Diane Diamond hooked me up with Daniel Hanks, who was Diane Diamond's private investigator. He did all the investigations into Michael Jackson. I interviewed Paul Baresi, who worked for the Michael Jackson defense. He worked for Anthony Pellicano, who, had to go to prison for wiretapping and for C4 explosives. He's kind of a fun guy. But Paul Baresi worked for him. And Paul Baresi came on my show and said that worked for the Michael Jackson defense. He said Michael Jackson was guilty. By total coincidence, one of the fellows who used to do my cell phone forensics when I first started doing it, became the police chief over there in Santa Maria County. So, then I got hired by some of the documentary people involved with the documentary film Leaving Neverland, and they asked me to document some questions about when the train station at Neverland was actually constructed. Because I forget David Safechuck had made different claims, and they said, well, it wasn't even built when he was claiming that he was there. So my job was I went through all the building department permits, to find out when this thing was built, and I found the permit for and the architectural sketches for this train station, but the stamp on that was different than all the other stamps. I believe it was inserted into the building department at a later date. I can't vouch for the authenticity of that, but the clients were happy with the information they had, and they moved on. Other than that, Mark Garagos was an attorney for Michael Jackson, and he had referred clients to me because I was involved with a little bit with that Lacey Peterson case. Some peripheral cases on that, doing email traces, online defamation cases, and some copyright lawsuits, litigation that was around that case. And so Mark Garagos had seen my work involved with the email tracing, and he had used to refer clients to me, and he was an attorney for Michael Jackson. A lot of Michael Jackson stuff. I can't really.
Did you ever meet him personally, though?
No, definitely not. No. I did run into LaToya Jackson. She lived in the same community I lived. We were at the same dry cleaners one time. I ran into Joe Jackson at a casino in Vegas one time. Oh yeah. It's off the top of my head. That's all I can think of.
Okay, so one more thing about Michael. Hold on, sorry, Bill.
Yeah, no worries. No worries.
When he passed away, there were speculations of the doctor actually killing him. What is your intake on that?
I think Jackson was one of the worst drug addicts in history.
Really?
Don't you? If he's taking anesthesia. And not many drug addicts, are they're into Demerol. He wrote a song about Demerol.
Wow.
He was into. Oh yeah. I forgot a couple of things. Yeah. I interviewed Vincent F. Amen. I've done 3 interviews with him now, and he was Michael Jackson's assistant. He was friends with the Casio family, the ones that are now suing Michael Jackson for molestation. And he was a co-defendant. He was an unindicted co-conspirator in the case in Santa Maria County. And in that case, he's the one that found that magazine. In this last thing you're seeing here about the verdict documentary.
Yeah.
And they talk about Vincent F. Amen finding this magazine that had circled ways to order child porn. And it was a child nudist magazine, but there were ads in the back on how to order child porn. And so Vincent F. Amen, he's the one that discovered that. He videotaped himself discovering it. and then he brought it because he was a unindicted co-conspirator. He and Frank Cassio brought it to their attorney, who was Joe Tacopina. Joe Tacopina is the former PBA lawyer for New York City, NYPD, and he was the lawyer for Mr. Donald J. Trump in the E. Jean Carroll case. So Joe Tacopina is a very, very, very well-known, very, very serious attorney. And these two young men, Vincent F. Amen and Frank Cassio, went in to see him thinking that he was going to represent them. They gave him this magazine as evidence, and the magazine disappears. Okay. Now they talk about this on they talk about this on Netflix about him finding the magazine and about the lawyer getting the magazine. But exclusive at the Opperman report, you find out that the lawyer was Joe Tacopina, because I was talking about that with Vincent F. Amen for like a year before, in September 25, way before that hit Netflix. Joe Tacopina, Vincent F. Amen also tells me exclusively that Frank Cassio, who was Michael Jackson's assistant, had Jeffrey Epstein's phone number in his cell phone, okay? And also staying there at Neverland was Ron Burkle, who was one of the Epstein people in the Epstein files, known for those kind of activities. And also, too, hanging out at the thing there was Chris Tucker, who was on Epstein's plane, and also, too, has his own private plane, and he's the one that Michael Jackson sent to go pick up Gavin Arvizo when all stuff hit the fan there, and the press was swarming all over Gavin Arvizo. He sent Chris Tucker on his private plane to snatch up this kid, who later on was a plaintiff against Jackson.
Wow.
And bring him over to Neverland. So there's a lot of connections between Jeffrey Epstein and Michael Jackson. Even Vincent F. Amen, who personally I like and I respect, and I think he's being honest now. He married Rena O, who is an Epstein victim, an Epstein survivor, and has a lawsuit against Virginia Roberts Giuffre, defamation lawsuit against her estate right now.
You got anything else about Michael Jackson, Bill?
No, not about Michael Jackson, but I do have one that I bet you the listeners would love to hear about. You've done everything from infidelity cases to dealing with the White House. Have you ever had any personal dealings with or run across the mob/mafia?
Oh, are you kidding me? Yeah, of course. I started in Brooklyn, New York. See, I started out as an information broker. I had access to phone company information. Did I tell you this story?
No.
Well, yeah. No. What happened was, I had a guy at the phone company, and if I gave him an unlisted phone number, he could come back with the name, the address, all the local phone calls and the long distance phone calls from that landline phone number. We're talking 1979, 1980. This was gold back in those days. You could also get the guy's social security number. You can get his work phone number. His bank account number was on there sometime. This information was gold. It was golden. And that's how I made my name as a very young man, with all the big lawyers in New York and all the big private investigators, all the big bail bondsmen. That's how I made my bones over there. And well, the first PI office I worked in Brooklyn was an organized crime private investigator who worked our first big case was the Carmine Persico case. Okay, we worked on that. Then after that, it was, I don't remember, it was the Pizza Connection case was the next one, was that big heroin smuggling case involving, all these cases was against Rudy Giuliani and Michael Chertoff, was Rudy Giuliani's under deputy prosecutor. The Pizza Connection case which was a big, one of the longest running cases where these organized crime figures from Italy and the United States were bringing in heroin and distributing them through a chain of pizzerias. Okay, and just by wild coincidence, one of the main headquarters of this operation that we had the wiretaps was in Queens, and my little Irish Catholic Queens cousin was in there answering the phones for these pizza orders. So we're sitting in the PI office going through these phone records. Because what happens is the federal government, the FBI, will come up with a transcript of what they hear on the tapes, and then they're saying, "Well, bring in the drugs, bring in the coke, bring in the dope." and then we have our own version. Well, we have a lot of hope.
Right.
Give them a hug, But we hear on the tape, so we have our own transcript, and they have
So
their
is that why their special topping pizza sold so well?
Well, you know what? They would use a pizza slang as part of their cheese, they would call it, and stuff like that for the drugs. And then the other one was the commission trial. I worked on that too. So yeah, I worked on big organized crime cases. My whole beginning of my career was all those big organized crime cases. And then later on, I went on to own a nightclub in Manhattan myself, which many people consider to be kind of an organized crime situation. And I grew up in Staten Island too, so I was all around that stuff.
Right.
Cool.
All right. Second to last topic. It ties into the Epstein, but really, it's more of the presidential. I want to know your intake on Donald Trump. What is your perspective of him?
Well, I grew up in New York. So I've seen Trump, from the start. I used to go to all those boxing matches down in Atlantic City, at Trump Casino in Atlantic City. I saw him once at the U.S. Open, and he was about 10, 20 seats ahead of me, lower. And every time I would look by, he was staring right at me. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
And I always wondered, it was the day after Princess Diana had died. It was back that time. And the only other connection I had to Trump around that period of time was about 6 months earlier. I was out on a date with a bunch of flight attendants. Okay, me and my friends were a big group date with a bunch of flight attendants. And one of the flight attendants said, "You'll never believe who's at our apartment." Because you know how those flight attendant apartments where they share those apartments and they're all coming and going all the time?
Right.
And she goes, "You'll never believe who's at our apartment right now." And I said, "Who?" She goes, "Marla Maples." This was right after Marla Maples, the paparazzi was all over Marla Maples. And Marla Maples had to run and hide in the middle of the night. And she showed up at this apartment with a big garbage bag of all her clothes, okay? A trash bag. And she's hiding out in this apartment. I says, "Whoa." So I made a joke and I says, "Well, let's go and tap the phones and then we could sell it to the tabloids." And everyone gets mad at me. "Oh, you're a horrible person." I was just joking, right? But I told But what happened was I told the same joke to Bo Dietl, Bo Dietl and Associates, okay, who was a big private investigator in New York. And especially, at that time, now even bigger. In fact, I think they made him head of the Department of Homeland Security or something. Trump just gave him a big job.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right. So, no, he's a big shot. He's big time. He ran for governor, ran for mayor and stuff like that. He's in that movie with Harvey Keitel called Bad Lieutenant.
Oh,
okay.
Oh, gritty film.
Well, that's the story of Bo Dietl.
Yeah.
Bo Dietl is that cop.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
He's the Harvey Keitel cop. Yeah.
Is that the one where you see Harvey Keitel full frontal nudity? Is that
No, that's the piano. No. Don't
Okay. You're going to HR bill.
So I had told Bo Dietl that story, and the only thing I could think is why Trump would be staring me down at the U.S. Open is that Bo went to him and said, "Oh, Mr. Trump, I think we should keep an eye on this Mr. Opperman. Keep an eye on Mr. Eddie Open there. Put a file together on him and then keep a surveillance on him." Right. Which is because Bo was quick to make a buck and charge a billionaire like Trump. So, but then, so that was my first contact with Trump. I couldn't imagine why he would want to deal with me.
I was going to say, you told us a story how you were booted from the press corps. Why don't you elaborate?
That was more recent. But back in my progression with Trump is I did my client of mine was Keith Schiller, who was Trump's head of security at the Trump Tower, and then later on went to work as the office manager for the White House for Trump. Keith Schiller. Keith Schiller worked for a fellow named the Fisher Foundation. Okay, Fisher House. Who's this big billionaire in New York who was an old guy, and when his friends die and have funerals, he hires like 1,000 cops to come and do the funeral procession with the bagpipes and the whole deal, and stand there with their uniforms and stuff like that. And Keith Schiller is the guy that would broker those deals. So he had a lot of juice with the cops, and then he went to work for Trump. He also used to recruit guys for Eric Prince over at Blackwater. They wanted the cops were misfit cops that had DUIs and domestic violence cases and stuff like that. They wanted misfits, cops that weren't good cops. So I had that connection to Trump too as well. Now, so later on when I had the radio show and I started doing what do you call it, covering the rallies, the election rallies and stuff like that, my press credentials, I was sitting right in the middle of the Washington Post, WLMNO, Opperman, Washington O, and then the LA Times, LMNOP. Okay. And I was right in the middle of these two guys. And then one day we look over and the the Washington Post is no longer there because they got their credentials pulled. And then wouldn't you know it, a short time after that, I got my credentials pulled. And I was so disappointed because, I was like a young, radio guy, young reporter. Oh man, what happened here? I was so excited. I was still, the Clinton still liked me and Bernie still liked me, but Trump wouldn't let me come back. Okay, in the press bench anyway. And so then one day I get a phone call at night from a pollster who wants to question me about polls. And it was just an odd, I've had those calls before, and it was just an odd call. And I could hear somebody whispering questions to her in her ear in the background. Ask him this, ask him this. And then they said they vetted me that way, and said if I would be fair to Trump. And then I got my credentials back, and I never lost them since. And now I'm on the White House press list. I get all the press advance notices and stuff.
So can you do can you give a special wink or a little hand signal to Trump and you'll get the information you want?
Right.
Well, no, definitely not. But like I think I told you on the phone the other day, those press releases do have it's advanced information. You can't play the stock market with that information. And I think that's one of the ways that he keeps the press on his side is because he gives out that information in advance.
So I'm pretty sure the viewers want to know. I've heard Trump smells really bad and eats a lot of McDonald's.
Right. I was the first one to report that. I forget which trial it was. It wasn't the 34 felonies. No, it had to be the Eugene Carroll trial. Okay. It was the one where Chuck Zito and stuff like that went to the trial. The former head of the Hells Angels. And what happened was a friend of mine was covering the trial in the press outside, and when the first day Trump came out, everyone could smell it. It was so horrible; they could smell it really bad, and you can even see the lawyers next to him were like this. It was so bad because he had ordered all these Big Macs for lunch, like 25 Big Macs or something for the whole legal team. And so then it was so bad though that the next day, instead of having him come out close to the press, they moved it to the second floor, and he would come out on this balcony and do a press conference, and the press was blowing. They had to yell up the answers so that they couldn't smell it. So I was the first one and you can look up the show. It's called "Is Trump Incontinent to Stand Trial?" You can look up the show and see. I was the first, since nobody wants to give me credit for being first for anything. I was the first, by the way. James Woods. Everybody's talking about James Woods. You following that?
No, I'm following the David Burke trial right now.
Well, you mean Charlie Kirk?
No, David. D4V. He killed a young girl in California.
No, I'm not following that. No.
Yeah,
But
he's a rapper.
Talking about how James Woods was hitting on a 16-year-old girl, and that in his movie, what he did with the Raw Dogs, he was hitting on a young teenage co-star too as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I reported on that 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I was talking about James Woods, because he was in a film about McMartin Preschool. And McMartin Preschool was that case in California, Manhattan Beach, California, where the McMartin family were molesting kids in their preschool, okay? And later on, I had an eyewitness who was brought there to the scene by Ted Gunderson, the former FBI agent, Los Angeles, in charge of FBI. And he brought in this guy with ground-penetrating radar, and he couldn't find any tunnels or anything. The kids were talking about them being taken down underground in tunnels, but he couldn't find any. But then he said, well, what about this detached garage? And I says, oh, that's not our garage. That's the neighbor's garage. After the trial was over, they called up my friend, the ground-penetrating radar guy, and he went there and he saw the garage was demolished, and there was a hand-dug room and a hand-dug basement and a hand-dug staircase underneath that detached garage. And then later on, the FBI came out with a sketch, and I have that sketch at the Opperman Report Patreon for free. And there's a sketch and an arrow, and it says tunnel entrance right to that detached garage. So James Woods did a movie about McMartin that was an absolute whitewash of that whole entire incident, claiming that the poor McMartin family were railroaded. But he had to have known, because a fellow named Alex Constantine, who had done so much research on that case, had contacted the producers of that case, the producers of that movie, who was Oliver Stone, the hero, and told him, Oliver Stone, we're warning you, the people involved in that movie, the people involved in that script are a bunch of bad people, okay? And I later on confronted Oliver Stone's son about it, and he says, oh, yeah, you know, whoa. He didn't really deny it. And James Woods was in that film, too, doing that whitewash of the McMartin preschool child abuse case, which was a huge child abuse case.
All right, Ed. Well, we've had an amazing conversation, and I don't want to finish it too early, but we've got so much. But I want to end it with, and Amber, I'll let you finish off with one.
I want to ask the biggest question of all. I saved it for the last 9 minutes.
I will ask one, and then you can give the big whammo finishing one.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you've talked about the different aspects of technology, of dealing with different people, of having to go through all the channels to get your information. If there's somebody watching or listening that wants to enter the field of private investigation, one, would you encourage it? Two, what would they expect the first couple years of their career to be like?
I wouldn't encourage it. I wouldn't encourage it. There's not a lot of money in this, unless you're doing lawsuits, you know, unless you know what you're doing, you know,
right.
and it takes a long time to get to that place. Most PIs are retired cops who have a pension and sometimes even a second job. And they just have a couple of lawyers they work for, a couple of insurance companies, or those workman's comp cases they're working on. And that's the miserable day-to-day or surveillance. You know, and people, you hear about PI work, and they start talking about surveillance. That's the most miserable stuff you could ever do in your life, is sitting and doing surveillance. That's just, you know, nobody wants to do that. It's worse than Uber Eats. It's nothing glamorous about that, man. You know, I'd rather do Uber Eats than sit on a surveillance. You call those guys surveillance monkeys. Those guys, anybody's still doing that. So it's not a happy field. You know, yeah, listen, I've met and been involved with some of the most interesting people in the world, you know, with my radio show and the PI work. You know, I've met and talked to the most interesting people in the world, become friends with people. I just finished a show with a private investigator named Tony Spurl, he worked for Larry Flint. He was one of Larry Flint's bodyguards. And he was in that whole mix with all those CIA and hitman Larry Flint bodyguards. I don't know if you guys know those stories about
a little bit of them.
Yeah, Bill Menser, you know, he knows Bill Menser, Bill Ryder, he knows all those guys who are all most of them in prison for murders, you know. So he was in the mix. So he you know, great interview with him. He was involved with Charles Manson and the Manson ashes and stuff, and all kinds of great stories this guy has. Just did 2 hours with him. So PI work, you know, it can be interesting. But it's not for the weak at heart. That's one, and it's not that rewarding, really.
Right.
So there's a lot of the grind with PI work.
Well, yeah. As a young, I'm going to tell you, when I was working in Brooklyn, when I was telling you there, man, part of my work, you'd have to sit there and go through these crisscross directories where you would look up phone numbers to find addresses. You know, just sit there with stacks and stacks of phone books and stuff. Just the kind of scut work you had to do, and then process serving. They say you have to do this process service. You know, there's a lot of scut work to get started in this. It's no fun.
Okay. And Amber, I can't wait for this final question.
No, I'm not married, Amber. Is that the question?
It's a part two. It's a two-part. So now I know there's over 3.5 million files that was published on the FBI site. And one of them that really caught my eye was the picture with a child. And they were said that they had ate part of a baby.
Yeah, I specifically got a call from one of the plaintiff's attorneys in this case. A lot of those allegations, I don't know the picture of the child of the specific. I know there's all this talk about eating babies, and I don't think there's any credibility to it at all. A lot of these, what's in the files, are just reports made to the FBI or just letters or emails that there's no confirmation on them whatsoever. There's a big story out there, or at least it was when it first came out, of this limo driver, Dan Faree. Remember that guy? Dan Faree, the limo driver? And
Yep.
he said how his stepdaughter was raped by Trump and Epstein, and then she was found dead with a gunshot wound, and and it's all this stuff. And now he had Trump in the back seat of his limousine, and Trump was talking into his phone, and all this crazy stuff. So I tracked him down and I interviewed him. Well, first of all, when they first started promoting this guy and his story, they showed his FBI phone call, his FBI report, and they only showed the first 2 pages. They didn't show the 3rd page, where he also claims he met Timothy McVeigh and he met Hillary Clinton, and she was drunk and all this crazy stuff. And then when I tracked the guy down and I interviewed him, he starts talking about how he invented Facebook. Okay. And then, and he met Timothy McVeigh, and he met all these other people, and Trump pulled a gun on him, and Trump started talking about COVID. And, I just let him talk, and I let him go on and on and on. I got 2 hours with this guy, and absolutely zero credibility. Couldn't be worse.
So what credibility do you think with the Epstein files that is actually true in all of them files?
Well, a lot of those, like I said, a lot of those wild reports that are being promoted, I think that's to discredit the real stuff that's in there. Yeah, okay. Now, there's
I know a lot of it's redacted.
Well, yeah, but a lot of that stuff is redacted. I can tell you who's in it. There's a letter in there from Conchita Sarnoff that's redacted. I know she wrote it because I've seen some of this. I got a lot of stuff that's redacted. I got a lot of stuff. I have the whole 200 list of masseuses and victims, the 200 list. I got that. It's redacted. I have that list. I have a lot of stuff. I've had stuff for years, And even what I didn't have, though, is my client, Tom Mayer, in the Katie Johnson case. He had made a complaint to the FBI on July 4, 2016. I wasn't even aware of that. I didn't know about that at all. And that just came out in the files, too.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. So there's a lot of stuff. I'm in the files. There's an email from one of my clients and guests on my show, Jody Williams, who is a huge madam and sex worker. She's became an advocate for sex workers. Sex Workers Anonymous was her group. And she did a lot of work for Las Vegas Metro Police Department, stuff like that. And there's an email from her to the FBI that I'm mentioned in. And then a bunch of my cases in there. Hoffenberg's in there, who I took his statement for the U.S. Virgin Islands. And a couple other cases I can't talk about. But
Right. Yeah, I didn't want to touch too much on the Epstein files, only because a lot of it, is kind of scary. So I didn't want to touch too much on it. I just wanted, to know a little bit about it. Like I said, I've read the whole thing. I went into a deep dive all over it, and I was in a rabbit hole for a couple of weeks. It was very, very unappealing to me. But the house was beautiful. But that was the only thing that I really cared about. But other than that, everything I read was very scary. A lot of it was redacted. The videos I seen, I was just appalled by them. I didn't really want to look at them anymore. I was disturbed by some of the things.
Yeah. One final thing. Was Bill Gates involved with Epstein?
Yeah. There's a lot of connections between Gates and Epstein. Epstein actually appointed an assistant of Bill Gates, one of his top executive advisors, as his backup co-executor of his estate. And then when they reached out to Gates and this fellow, he said, well, I don't know anything about this. I don't know anything about this. So I quote unquote took a deep dive on this guy. And this guy's went up to some interesting stuff himself with his own private plane with some models in the back and his boyfriend. There's a lot of stuff going on with this guy. You can check out his Instagram page. There's a lot of stuff with this guy. So there are connections between Gates and Epstein. And Gates did just testify before the Oversight Committee, and he made some allegations that Gates was that Epstein was putting pressure on him because he knew about affairs he had with some Russian models. A lot is made too about how Gates's wife supposedly left him over his connections with Epstein. I don't find that to be credible. I think that she just got to the PR people first and put out her statement first. I don't believe this business about wives not knowing what their husbands are up to.
Right. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they knew exactly what was going on. Just like with Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, the Prince. There was a lot of them that were there. There's lists and lists. Like if you look at the list, Bill, it's a whole bunch of people that's name is on there, and you'd be surprised on whose name you see.
All right. Well, Ed, this has been absolutely fabulous. We could literally be talking to you for hours and hours. And we're hoping that you'd want to come back again, because I know the listeners will want to know, and it gives you a platform to promote anything you want to promote. Is there anything right now that you want to let the public know? Where can they hear you? Have you written anything? Are you going to be speaking somewhere? Anything of that nature?
Yeah, I did write that book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator by Ed Opperman. You can find that on Amazon. There's a Kindle version out there too. My Patreon has all the shows with all the ads and the commercials cut out. It's like I got like 7,000 hours of radio, okay? And so much of it is exclusive. But in the Patreon as well, there's a lot of exclusive documents. I'm the guy who first obtained a 24-page letter, exhibit 20, exhibit, I forget what it was. It's 47, it might be, that Jerry Lefcourt wrote. This 24-page letter describing Jeffrey Epstein as being the creator of the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton Global Initiative. And he used that as his a bargaining chip to get Jeffrey Epstein a better deal on his plea negotiations. I discovered that letter. I have all the Maria Farmer lawsuits against the FBI about her Epstein stuff. A lot of Epstein documents, all kinds of stuff in my Patreon for free. So you can just join the Patreon and just look through the free documents. There's a ton of stuff in there.
Right. I would love to do a part 2 with you. If you ever want to deep dive on the Epstein files. Like I said, I read it all. I know a lot about the Epstein files. I just didn't want to like overwhelm ourselves today with the Epstein files, since I have a list of questions for that. I just didn't want to do it too much, only because, it's a high profile case. So I just wanted to move around a little bit, and touch different subjects. But if you would love to, I would love to do a second part.
If in your Patreon you've had live music of Corey playing the guitar, it's okay.
No. Yeah, I did a show called the Corey Story Circus, and I said that's it. I give up with Corey. I'm done with Corey Feldman. I don't want anything to do with Corey Feldman anymore. But by the way, I do a monthly interview with Dave Emery, the legendary Dave Emery, 47 years of anti-fascist radio.
Oh wow!
About Epstein updates of what's going on in the case. And if you can go back and find those shows, if you could join the Dave Emery Patreon, there's all this stuff about the guards over at MCC and the first one who made that report on 4chan about Epstein. I give all that information in advance before it hits the news, okay? So you can hear all that. So anybody, no one wants to give me any credit for anything, but unless I'm a time traveler, you can hear the recordings of me talking about this stuff before it hit the news. And then when it does finally hit Oversight, they didn't even know the chain of events that got that witness before them at Oversight. So that's a good story.
Oh, wow.
If you want to come back.
I'll definitely go and listen.
So, Justin, if you're listening, we're about to close her up. So,
absolutely.
Ed, all I can say is thank you. You've enlightened
I
us.
thank
You've
you
made
as
the
myself and
Thank you.
appreciate you.
and we'd love to have you back. We just would love to know when your schedule allows for, because I know you're still involved in the investigation game, and you don't always want things to be so public and out there. So we'll work with you, but we definitely would love to have you back. And anybody listening who does not know as much as you'd want about Ed, there's a lot out there. Get his book, listen to his podcast. What's your podcast called, Ed?
The Opperman Report, 7,000 hours of podcasts. Since 2000. By the way, I did the very first radio show about Jeffrey Epstein. I couldn't even find a guest. Nobody knew the name. 2013. So the Epstein stuff I got come out of my ears.
Oh, I'm sure you could have found some accountants or something, you know.
No, believe it or not, no, at the time nobody knew the name.
Gotcha. Okay, Amber, do you have any last minute goodbyes?
Ed, I do appreciate you. Bill, I do appreciate you for joining my show today. With that said, thank you very much and have a good night.
Ciao.